Hi, everybody. I'm here with Ben Sesser, who's one of the co-founders at Brighthire, and we're going to be talking about recruiter enablement. So, Ben, give us a quick introduction to your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Brighthire. We're about 4 years old. I've been an operator in scaling companies for the last dozen years in tech, wearing a lot of different hats, including leading talent and HR for a while. And my roots are in the human capital space. So started my career at a company called CEB, Corporate Executive Board, which is a research advisory firm. It's now Gartner for HR. I was there for a while and was a labor relations major. So I'm one of those folks that didn't fall into the space totally. I studied it a little bit academically and it's been a fun journey.
Great. Okay. So, first of all, I always ask this question: what's recruiter enablement to Ben?
Yeah, recruiter enablement is to me about how do you create the conditions for success for a recruiting team and for individual recruiters. It's investing to make everyone more effective as a whole and to help people grow individually. And to me, it breaks out into kind of four buckets. One is tools and technology. So are we providing the right tools to the team? Are we training them how to use them effectively? This tends to be, in my experience, perhaps the biggest focus in many organizations. A second would be process. So what are the steps we want the team to take to lead to success? And some of those are going to be kind of compliance oriented. How do we open a rec? Some will be to get to better outcomes. How do we run an intake? And then the last two for me are knowledge and technique. So knowledge, what do our recruiters and our recruiting team need to know and what knowledge they need to grow over time to be successful? So that could be understanding the business, understanding a client in a staffing context, understanding a particular function or role that you're recruiting for. And then technique is, how do we refine our craft and get better, right? And that could be, how do we pitch? How do we evaluate capabilities? How do we calibrate with hiring managers? How do we manage the candidate journey? I think those four to me are the big buckets of recruiter enablement, which kind of resembles sales enablement, but there are definitely some differences structurally, both in terms of the things that you're doing to make folks successful, but also historically the resourcing around recruiter enablement is very different from the resourcing around sales enablement in many organizations.
Yeah, agreed. Okay. So, I was gonna go straight to tell us about Brighthire, but actually, uh, what I want to know is just first, tell us a bit about the genesis of this business. Tell me about the
Yeah.
conversation that led to this business, because that's a really useful, interesting story.
Yeah, like as I mentioned, I have a kind of roots in the human capital space. I've always been really interested in the people side of business and actually careers in general, kind of what careers mean for people. And yeah, Brighthire was founded after a stint scaling a previous technology company from seed to kind of Series D, late stage, and wearing a bunch of different hats. And I was in the unique position to wear a talent and HR hat and a finance hat. And that taught me two things. One, a startup is a really useful. It's almost like studying fruit flies. You see things very quickly, and so one of the things is that you see in a startup is just how impactful every individual person is on an organization's overall success. So if you need strategy to be successful, but it doesn't execute itself. You need people to execute strategy, and hiring is how you continuously build your team. And so it's a core competency for your long-term success very clearly, and so you have to get it right. And then the second thing was with the finance hat, it's the number one capital expenditure in your business, right? It's where you're investing your dollars. And so if it's
Yeah.
the most important ingredient for your future success and it's where you're investing all your dollars, it should be the most sophisticated, best run, most scrutinized process in the organization. And that's just not the case. And so it started with the question of why. And actually enablement was a big part of our journey because I brought that question to my co-founder and said, hey, why is there's such a cognitive gap between how important this is and how effectively we can run it at scale, and describe the problem of, at the heart of it, conversations drive every hiring outcome. The conversations you have with candidates, how you sell, how you assess, and then the decisions on the back of those are the outcomes they drive. And those conversations kind of happen and disappear, which makes it really hard to be great. And we'd see some technology, or my co-founder did on the sales side, which was really built for sales enablement, and saw an opportunity to apply that same technology to recruiting in a very specific way to create success, and felt like this is bound to happen. Technology moves from sales and marketing to recruiting on a 4 or 5 year delay, and so we felt like there was a really compelling opportunity to refine how folks hire and to elevate the craft of recruiting. So that's the quick story.
Great. Well, look, as people who know me will know, I'm a big fan of looking at technologies from other spaces, and that I think we need in talent acquisition and applying it. So there's been a number of people. I'm glad that you've joined me today, because there's a number of people that have been big fans of your company who have already been on interviews with me on this channel. So tell us about the company. Like, what does it do? How does it work?
Yeah, totally. So Brighthire is the leading interview intelligence platform. You know, at the core, as I mentioned, like, conversations drive every hiring outcome, full stop. And there's incredibly important context on both sides of those conversations. And, you know, what happens in them drives every outcome, from like the assessment side, candidate experience, decision making. It's really a linchpin to recruiting in many respects. But they happen and disappear along with all the context, which makes it really challenging to be great, to run efficiently, to keep folks aligned. And so what we do is we capture that context, we record and transcribe conversations very seamlessly, sitting on top of the tools that teams already use, like Teams, Meet, and Zoom, ATSs, et cetera. And then we repackage that context into things like AI-generated highlights and AI-generated interview notes, reminders, insights. And by doing that, we make the process much more efficient and streamlined. We, you know, give organizations the ability to, you know, up-level quality. And that's like the quality of decision making, but also the quality of the performance of recruiters and interviewers. And we make the process more evidence-based, right? Which we think it makes more equitable. And so, you know, we see a bunch of impact from that work, but one of which is like the hire rate goes up 35%. We've seen 27% less interviews per hire across like tens and tens of thousands of client interviews that we've studied. Faster scorecard completion, lower cost per hire. So it works. That's the most important thing. Yeah.
So you're saying, so instead of me interviewing you and you're talking and I'm like trying to write stuff down, or I'm on another screen typing, I don't need to worry about that, right? So I can give you more focus than I could if I was like having to basically try and take notes that I can't really read in the future because I'm having to write so fast.
Totally. So yeah, day in, day out, for a recruiter, for an interviewer, anyone that's running a candidate conversation, you know, an interview is a bunch of cognitive load, right? You're trying to remember what to cover, think of the last thing the person told you that you can probe, write it all down so you don't forget it. You're just doing a lot. And so can we take all the cognitive load off the table so you can engage really effectively with candidates in like the very finite amount of time you have with them, get the most out of that conversation, deliver the most, right? Give back to the candidate, and then have perfectly documented notes, highlights, and a bunch of useful outputs that, one, save you time, you know, transferring that information to other people, but also just make the process of interviewing more enjoyable. So that's like the day in, day out of an interview. And now across, you know, depending if you're on a staffing side or in-house, you have this incredible candidate context, either to share with a client, to share with the hiring manager, and to facilitate like really, really effective calibration and decision making internally, in a way that was impossible before.
And you're filing this information in what? In the ATS, in the CRM, in both?
Great question. Yeah, both. So, you know, Brighthire has software. We're a SaaS platform, so it all lives in Brighthire and you can get it there. But we've built our platform, you know, one of the principles is meet people where they are. And so that today they're in the ATS, they're in CRM, they're in email, Slack, Teams. And so that information is all accessible. You could watch interviews directly from inside an ATS, on a candidate's page, on a scorecard, you know, and so it's incredibly seamless where folks are working today.
And presumably this also means like the interview, I mean, my interviews previously, they would have been, you know, I'd have written down the notes on here, and like none of my colleagues can access this.
No.
So presumably people can go and search for it if they're looking for a particular skill set or a conversation, like some keywords or a phrase or something like that. You can go
Rediscovery, candidate intelligence is massive, right? And so again, depends on the context, but you know, if you're managing tons of candidates at scale or in an agency context, you know, the ability to pull up information on a candidate is incredibly powerful, right? And we see that all the time. Time to get to, you know, silver medalists or past candidates, not just high level keywords on a resume, but you know, what do they talk about, and then understand how they talked about it really quickly, and then craft a really personalized outreach to them very quickly about the last conversation someone had with them to get them re-engaged. There's this incredible power in sort of going back to candidates you've talked to previously.
Great. Okay. Ben, thanks very much for joining me. It's been really great to hear your comments on recruiter enablement. I agree with all of it. And it's been really great to hear about your product as well and what it does. What's your call to action for anybody watching this? What should
Yeah.
they do if they're interested in what you're offering?
Yeah, really quick. So on the recruiter enablement side, there's a lot of benefit from capturing context. From formal training, you can make playlists in Brighthire and assign them, to informal. And so we see incredible recruiter ramp and enablement come out of our product. And so if you're curious to hear more about the recruiter enablement side, go to brighthire.com, reach out, or email me, ben@brighthire.ai. Happy to chat. And yeah, it's an area that we're really passionate about here in terms of up-leveling the craft of recruiting. And this really touches on the knowledge and technique side that I talked about earlier. And so we'd love to chat with folks about that.
Great. Did you hear that, everybody? The CEO just gave you his email address.
That we roll.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Ben. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam.